This is the 2025 Kia EV6 GT, re-engineered, facelifted and with more power than most supercars from a few years ago. 641 brake horsepower and a 0 to 62 sprint that takes just 3.5 seconds. This car is seriously impressive and it's now better than ever before. Hi guys, my name's Tish and welcome back to my channel Auto Social UK. In today's video we'll be talking about the facelifted changes to the EV6 GT, as well as testing out the new virtual gear shifts and also telling you all the details of the re-engineering that Kia have done to make this car not only more powerful but better to drive. So if that sounds good, then please keep watching, and if you like new car reviews and car content, well, you're in the right place. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button. So firstly, I think we need to talk about that uplift in power, because let's face it, that's the most exciting thing. One of the biggest upgrades for the 2025 EV6 GT is what's under the skin, or more specifically, how much more power it's now packing. Kia has squeezed an extra 64 brake horsepower and 30 Newton meters of torque out of the same dual motor setup. And compared to the pre-facelift car, this means that it now brings total output to 641 brake horsepower and 770 Newton meters of torque. And that's all thanks to improvements in the battery's energy delivery and thermal management. The rear motor remains the hero here, so this produces 303 kilowatts of power, while the front motor adds a further 175 kilowatts. The upgraded battery, now 84 kilowatt hours instead of 77.4 kilowatt hours, isn't just bigger, it's smarter, with better cooling and better conductivity, which allows the motor to draw more consistent peak power, especially under hard acceleration. And while the 0 to 62 time hasn't changed all that much on paper, it's still a blistering 3.5 seconds, the real difference is on how the car can deliver that power. It's more responsive, it pulls harder at speed, and it feels more muscular and alive, particularly in the revised GT drive mode. Sure, straight line speed is great, but a real GT car also needs to be able to handle, especially if it wants to rival things like the BMW i4 M50 or the Porsche Taycan. And the good news is the EV6 GT has come a long way in that department. For the facelift, Kia's engineers have retuned the suspension, so they've softened the spring rate slightly for better comfort. And this is something that I could tell even before I knew that they tweaked it, and it's a big difference from the Ioniq 5N. They've also revised the dampening so the car feels more controlled and composed through corners. Despite being over 2 tons, the GT stays impressively flat when pushed hard, and it grips with real confidence. There's also a new variable ratio steering setup that's quicker to respond at lower angles and more stable at speed. It doesn't have the razor-sharp feel of a Taycan, but it's direct, consistent and confidence-inspiring. One of the easiest ways to spot that this is the facelifted EV6 GT is by its updated design. And while the changes might not jump out at you immediately, they actually are quite significant once you look a little bit closer. It also gets Kia's updated lighting signature, so these are called their star map lights. It gives it a high-tech look, but also looks a little bit meaner as well. You also get an updated front bumper. You have larger air vents, but also cleaner lines that just give it a sharper, more aggressive look. There are subtle aero tweaks as well. The bonnet sits lower, airflow is better managed through active air flaps. Around the back it's had a few nips and tucks just to help with airflow, but it still has that fantastic design. Argue with me or not, but I think this is not only one of the best looking EVs on sale today, but I think this is one of the best looking cars on sale today. It's got such a fantastic but commanding design about it. It looks sleek and modern, but also it still has some of the classic elements, like this ducktail spoiler, which gives it such a sporty look, and you've also got the second spoiler atop the roof too. It's just such a smart looking car. As I mentioned, this latest generation car now gets a larger battery, so it's up from 77.4 kilowatt hours to 84 kilowatt hours, and that gives you a nice top up of an extra 16 miles on the road, bringing the total range of the GT model to 279 miles. This isn't the most efficient EV. Being focused on performance with all of those upgrades and riding on 21-inch alloy wheels, I've seen around 3 to 3.5 miles per kilowatt hour, or 4 if I really tried hard. But if you want a car which goes further, you may have to look a little bit past the performance credentials of the GT and go for the standard EV6. Although, despite not having the most amount of range, it can charge extremely quickly. With an 800 volt architecture and peak DC charging of around 233 kilowatts, it could recharge from 10 to 80% in roughly 18 minutes. That's under half the time of many EVs on the road, giving you over 60 miles in just 4 minutes of plug-in time. But there's a new contender. The MG i6 recently nudged ahead with a maximum charge rate of up to 396 kilowatts, meaning it can go from 10 to 80% in just 17 minutes, despite using a larger 100 kilowatt hour battery. But still, don't write off the EV6 GT just because it's not the fastest to charge on the road, because it actually gets consistent charging. Find a charger quick enough and it can sustain between 180 and 220 kilowatts of power throughout its charging curve, which is far more impressive than many of its rivals. Plus, it might have a bigger battery, but that larger battery is actually 1 kilogram lighter than the previous generation. Win-win. Inside, the EV6 GT maintains its futuristic and sharp dynamic cabin. This is one of my favourite cabins and it perfectly matches the exterior details. Inside you'll find this centre console which is really user friendly. You have your gear selector in the perfect place along with your start-stop button and the new addition of a fingerprint scanner. So this means you can set up your driving modes just to your fingerprint, and if you share the car with somebody else, they can scan their fingerprint and the car will completely change its setup from your seating position to your steering wheel, and all of your features within the cabin will be changed to your personal preferences, which feels so high tech, something from the future. Although by now I'd hope we are living in the future. We've not quite got flying cars, but at least we now have fingerprint scanners. It's also super handy that you have both of your cup holders here and tons of storage underneath. You also have your heated seats and heated steering wheel just on the front of this centre console, which once again I think is very user friendly. Above this you have one of my favourite features of the Kia EV6, and that is this switchable screen. This touchscreen here switches between being your climate control dials, which are physical, to switching to your radio controls instead. It's a really easy way of minimising the amount of buttons that you use, but also making things still very easy to function. I also love that you still get these wonderful bucket seats. These are actually very firm but super supportive. Leather on the outside, Alcantara down the centre which is perforated, and then you also have that lime green stitching around the exterior and this lime green stripe which runs down the centre, and that matches together not only with the brake calipers on the outside but also some of the features on the steering wheel, which we'll talk about in a moment. You also have this wonderful plastic but very high quality GT section in the middle of the seat as well. And elsewhere in the cabin you have lovely textures used. That's a change for this 2025 model. They've removed a lot of the gloss black. Hallelujah. And in the centre console that used to show up lots of fingerprints. Now you just have this brushed effect instead. You also have this nice textured armrest, and that same texture is also across the dashboard as well. It just feels the perfect combination of being sporty but feeling quite premium and high quality. The steering wheel, that's another thing which has changed for this 2025 model. This steering wheel first featured in the EV9 and then in the EV3, and it is bigger. And I don't know how I feel about this because it doesn't feel as sporty as the old steering wheel. The old steering wheel used to be 2-spoke and that did feel super sporty. This is now bigger, which does mean that they're able to fit more buttons on it and the buttons are easier to use. but I personally think that it may lose a little bit of its driving engagement by being that bit much bigger. It still feels really sporty though. You've got the lime green stitching around the inside, and you've got the 12 o'clock marker, and then of course you've got the wonderful GT button. So this is in the same place as it was before. So on the left hand, really easy to press, and that gives you all of your power and also gives you the new simulated gear shifters, which we'll talk about in a minute. But you've also got the drive mode button, which has moved from being on the right hand side to being in the centre, which again I really like. It's really easy to scroll through those, and I'll talk about what the driving modes do in a moment. But let's talk about those paddles. So when you're in any other mode other than GT, these paddles actually adjust your brake regen. So if you press the left hand, it moves up in the amount of brake regen, and the right moves down. You hold down the right hand side and this puts you in auto brake regen. This will then use satellite navigation, so when you're approaching junctions it will turn up your brake regen, but then as you enter dual carriageways or motorways it will turn it down, as you don't want aggressive braking when you're on the motorway. Very clever stuff. But as I mentioned, these aren't always your brake regen paddles. These also, for this latest generation, work as simulated gears. So why don't we go into the touchscreen? I'm going to go into my active sound design, make sure that I've got the loudest volume for this turned on, and we'll go test it out. Now, I know what you're thinking, EVs don't need gears. And yes, you are right, but what Kia's done here is it's given the driver a new way to connect with the car. So when you activate the GT mode, the paddle shifters that are behind the steering wheel, those ones that usually do brake regen, they don't do that anymore, and instead they actually simulate a 6-speed gearbox. You get gear shift sounds which are piped through the Meridian speakers, and a digital rev counter, and even a little pulse of torque to mimic a real gear change. And if you're sitting in the wrong gear, it'll even bounce off of the rev limiter before you change. It's actually surprisingly fun, and it gives the GT a more engaging hands-on feel when you're pushing on. Safety is also top tier. It scored the full 5 stars on the Euro NCAP testing, and you get all of the safety and driver tech you could ever need, including Motorway Assistant 2.0. You get the blind spot cameras when you indicate, and you can even park it using just the key. And despite this being the most powerful Kia ever, it still gets Kia's award-winning 7-year, 100,000-mile warranty. Plus you get 8 years warranty on both the battery and the motors. Oh, and get this, the facelifted version of the GT is cheaper than it was previously. It now starts from just under £60,000. Okay, I said cheaper, I didn't say cheap, but that's still £10,000 less than if you was to go for the BMW i4 M50 or the Porsche Taycan Turbo 4S. Now about those drive modes. The EV6 GT offers 6 different drive modes in total. So the first is your economy mode. So this calms everything down to maximise range. You get softer throttle response and lower power output. Then if you switch to your normal mode, this is your balanced everyday setting. It's a good mix of comfort and responsiveness. If you switch to sport, this sharpens up the steering and throttle, adds more urgency to the motors and stiffens up the ride, which I think is quite apparent. Hit the GT mode activated with the bright green button on the steering wheel, and this is where you unlock the car's full 641 brake horsepower. There's a firmer suspension, more aggressive stability control, and of course the virtual gear shift. You also get My Drive, which lets you mix and match. You can set power to Sport Plus, but keep the steering and the dampening in normal. And then there's Snow Mode. So this is the last of those on the steering wheel. And this limits the throttle response, softens power delivery, and it also adjusts the traction control to prevent wheel spin on slippery roads. It's ideal when conditions turn icy or wet, and it also gives you more grip and confidence in bad weather. It's still an EV6 underneath, so very, very practical. Inside the boot, you get 480 litres, which is very impressive for this class of car. It still also gets a frunk, although that's only 20 litres due to the front-mounted motor, but it's still big enough to put your charging cables. And you also get loads of legroom thanks to the 2.9 metre wheelbase. It's also super practical. You've got ISOFIX fitments, and one of my favourite features is the 3-pin plug, which is behind the rear bench. The EV6 GT is sharp, dynamic and blisteringly fast, all while still being incredibly practical and offering a fantastic warranty package. This car may be pushing £60,000, but it certainly keeps up with the big guns. And I have to applaud Kia, because they could have done what Stellantis done, and they could have built a 300 brake horsepower SUV, but no, they decided to do something which actually competes with supercars, and I think that's quite impressive, all whilst actually having the engineering to back it up. This thing is fast, but it also feels like it can really handle that power. And if you want to completely change its personality, pop it in eco mode and drive it like a serene everyday EV, then you can do that too. This is the car, in my opinion, that can do it all whilst looking like one of the best cars on the road today. I am a big fan of the EV6 GT, but maybe that's just me. I want to hear all of your thoughts and feelings. Let me know in the comments down below. I really hope you have enjoyed this video today, guys. If you have, please go ahead and give it a big thumbs up. And if you want to see more like it, then make sure you go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Until next time, see you later.